LeBron James at 40 is still a top player in the NBA. Steph Curry and Kevin Durant, both 36, are doing the same. Is the NBA getting old? I looked into this question using data, and the answer is actually no. The NBA is technically getting younger, but there's more to it. Let me walk you through how I came to this conclusion and explain what I found. To answer this question, the first step was to gather data. I used an NBA API package from GitHub to access information from NBA.com. With Python programming, I created a program to collect data on every NBA roster since the 1976 merger, saving details about every player who ever appeared in a game, including their ages on the opening night of each season. Next, we need to clean the data to ensure its accuracy. Since the data comes directly from the NBA's official website, it's mostly reliable. However, I noticed some minor errors, likely due to human mistakes. For example, Mark Jones, not a commentator but a player with the same name, was listed as playing in the NBA at the age of 9, which would be impressive but unlikely. After checking his Wikipedia profile, I found out he was actually 22 during his known season with the Nets in 1983. Although minor mistakes here and there like this would have insignificant impact on the analysis, I corrected this and a few other similar errors before moving on. Now that our dataset is ready, we can analyze it for insights. I calculated the average age of players each season. The term average here refers to the mean, which is found by adding all the ages together and dividing by the number of players. I then created a graph to show how the average age of NBA players has changed over the years. In the 1976-1977 NBA season, the average age was 26.29. Throughout the 1980s, the league got older, reaching a peak average age of 28.13 in 2000. However, after that, the average age began to drop. The decline became more pronounced in the 2010s, with the average age falling below 26, hitting 25.83 this season. This data shows that the NBA is actually getting younger, not older, which answers the question posed in the title, but there's more to understand about this trend. Knowing the average age is just part of the story. Statistics gives us tools to understand how player ages are distributed across the NBA. One important measure is the standard deviation, which helps us see how spread out the ages are. It tells us how much individual ages differ from the average age. From the graph, we can see that the standard deviation of player ages increased significantly from 3.29 in 1976 to 4.58 in 1998. After the year 2000, the data fluctuated but showed a slight downward trend, with the standard deviation at 4.36 for the 2024-25 NBA season. Now let's look at this chart known as histogram, which shows the distribution of NBA's players' ages for the 1976-1977 season. In histograms, the taller the bin, the more players are of that age. Most players fall within the age range of 23 to 29, with fewer players as the age increases. The distribution is slightly right-skewed, meaning that there are more younger players, with a sharper increase on the left side, aka the younger ages, and a smoother decrease on the right side, aka the older ages. Next, I'll show you how this histogram has changed from 1976 to 2025. You can see that there are more bins, and the bins are shorter, confirming the increase in standard deviation. Additionally, the peak of the histogram was shifted to the left, which supports the finding that the average age of NBA players has decreased. So far, we see that the average age of players increased from the 1970s to the 1990s, but has decreased since the 2000s. Meanwhile, the age gap between the players widened from the 1970s to the 1990s, but has remained relatively stable since the 2000s. It seems the 2000s were a turning point for this data. Why is that? This leads us to the next part of my analysis, the experience of NBA players. When we think of an NBA player being old, we often associate it with how long they have been in the league. For example, Andrew Wiggins may feel like he's been around forever because he was drafted in 2014 and is now in his 10th NBA season. He's only 29 years old, so he's not old in terms of age. Therefore, it's important to also consider the experience of NBA players to answer the question of whether the NBA is getting old in a figurative sense. Going back to why the 2000s seems to be a tipping point, I believe this is linked to the changes in NBA draft. Since the early 2000s, players have started entering the league at younger ages, often around 18 or 19, instead of waiting until they are 22 or 23 after playing 4 years in college. This shift could contribute to the overall decrease in the average age of NBA rosters. Just like we did with age, we will examine the mean experience, standard deviation, and the overall distribution of NBA players. First, let's look at how the average experience of players has changed over the years. Here, rookies count as 0 years of experience, sophomores as 1 year, and so on. In 1976, the average experience of players on NBA rosters was 2.67 years. We see a steady increase in average experience until the year 2000, when it reached 5.13 years. However, this data shows a different trend compared to player ages. Starting in 2001, the average experience dropped, followed by a slow increase throughout the 2000s. The 2010s saw another significant drop until 2020, followed by a slight rise, bringing us to an average experience of 4.47 years this season. As for the standard deviation, we again observe an increase from the 1970s to around 2000s. After that, the numbers fluctuated but largely stayed at a similar level. Now let's look at the histogram for the 1976-1977 season. This distribution is quite different from a normal distribution. It is extremely right-skewed, with a high peak at 0 years of experience. This is likely due to a large number of players coming from the ABA, resulting in many players having no NBA experience. Over the years, the distribution has become more spread out. While it remains right-skewed and peaks at 0 years of experience, the drop to the right is much smoother. The contrast in the change of age and experience of NBA players seems to validate my claim that the age of NBA players is dropping mainly due to players coming in younger, while have been staying in the league for a longer time. Still, I think there is more to the equation. The data we've discussed are on NBA rosters, but not every player on a roster gets playing time. For the 24-25 NBA season, a typical roster consists of 15 regular spots and 3 two-way spots, but only 8 to 10 players usually participate in a game. With the shift in NBA draft and the introduction of two-way contracts, teams often keep younger players at the end of the roster for development, while playing their more experienced players. This raises the question, is the average age of NBA players getting lower simply because more young, less experienced players are stashed at the end of the bench, while the players who actually plays remain around the same age? To explore this, I performed further analysis by rating players' ages based on minutes played. This means that if a player, like LeBron, plays 100 times more minutes than his son Bronny, LeBron's age will impact the average age 100 times more than Bronny. Here's the visualization of the rated average age. Starting from the 1976 season at 26.48, the mean experience peaked at 28.31 before dropping back to 26.45 this season. When we plot the rated and unrated averages together, we see that both lines follow a similar trend, an increase from the 1970s to the 1990s, followed by a decline from 2000s onward. However, the weighted average has consistently been higher than the unweighted average, suggesting that throughout NBA history, stashing younger players while relying on more seasoned veterans is nothing new. But it's also worth noting that the gap between the two lines have increased over the past 20 years, indicating that the strategy of stashing players has become more prominent in recent years. Despite this, it does not change the conclusion that the NBA is getting younger overall. When we look at the rated mean for years of experience, we see a consistent improvement, rising from 2.90 in 1976 to 5.61 this season. Comparing this to the unweighted data, both lines follow a similar trajectory, but the unweighted line is lower. This indicates that the players tend to stay in the NBA for longer today than what they did in the 1970s. This is both for rostered players and players with minutes. How about the top players in the league? Are stars like LeBron, KD, and Steph skewing our perception of age in the NBA? Are the elite players getting younger, or are they actually getting older? To explore this, I gathered data on players selected for all NBA teams through some raw programming. When we look at how the average age of all NBA players has changed over the past seasons, we see significant fluctuations. Compared to our previous graphs, this line shows more ups and downs and appears more random. I believe this randomness is influenced by the specific set of players available at any given time, rather than indicating a systematic trend. While it does seem like the average age is climbing recently, we may need to wait for the current group of superstars to retire before we can determine if there's a consistent shift. As for years of experience, similar to our previous data, we see a steady upward trend, although with more fluctuations. When we place the three lines side by side, we observe that all of them trend upward, with the All-NBA line consistently at the highest level. From this, it does seem like the top of the NBA is getting older from the field of experience. To wrap up this analysis, let's summarize our findings. Looking at rosters, the average age of NBA players has been trending downward over the past 30 years. For players who actually see minutes on the court, the average age also appears to be decreasing, but at a slower rate. In contrast, for all NBA teams, we have yet to see a steady trend. Instead, the data shows a more random movement. However, when we examine years of experience among NBA players, all three metrics show an increasing trend since the 1970s. So is the NBA getting older? Technically, no. But the bigger picture is more complex and depends on how you frame the question. This video mainly focused on presenting the raw data of the age and experience change on the NBA. Discovering and explaining why that's the case, though, would be another topic. Feel free to come up with your own hypothesis. Still, through this analysis, I have gained a deeper understanding on how the NBA is moving age and experience-wise. Hope you have learned something here as well.